Doors are simple things. They open, they close. They're meant to keep us safe, to separate what's inside from what's outside. But what if a door wasn't supposed to be there? What if it led to someplace you were never meant to go? Tonight's story is about a mysterious black door that appeared where it shouldn't have, and the terrifying events that followed. This is the story of Mark and the black door that changed his life forever. Asterisk, first of all, make sure you subscribe my channel and press bell icon for more scary stories. Asterisk, Mark was your average guy in his late 20s, living alone in a small rental house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was quiet, and that's exactly what he needed. The house was old, with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper, but it had character. It had been his home for 3 years without incident, until the morning the door appeared. Asterisk, it was a Sunday, just before dawn, when Mark woke up feeling restless. He wasn't sure why, but something felt off. He chalked it up to a bad dream and decided to get out of bed to make coffee. As he stepped into the hallway, he noticed it immediately. A door, a black door that hadn't been there the night before. Asterisk, Mark froze, his heart pounding. The door stood at the end of the hallway, where there had once been nothing but a blank wall. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and painted a deep matte black. There were no markings, no doorknob, just a smooth, featureless surface. He rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he was still dreaming, but the door remained. Asterisk, what the hell? He muttered under his breath. He approached it cautiously, his bare feet creaking on the wooden floor. The air around the door felt different, colder, heavier. When he reached out to touch it, a static charge prickled his fingertips, and he pulled his hand back instinctively. He didn't try to open it. Not yet. Asterisk, Mark spent the rest of the morning trying to convince himself that the door wasn't real. Maybe he was hallucinating. Maybe it was a prank by his landlord. But deep down, he knew neither explanation made sense. As the hours passed, the house began to feel different. Shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. The sound of creaking would echo in rooms where no one was walking. And then there was the whispering. Asterisk, it started faintly, just on the edge of his hearing, like the murmur of a distant conversation. At first, he thought it was coming from outside, but when he stepped out onto the porch, the world was silent. It was only when he re-entered the house that he realized the whispers were coming from the black door. The closer he got, the louder they became, though he could never make out the words. Asterisk, by nightfall, Mark was on edge. He'd locked all the other doors in the house and armed himself with a baseball bat, though he wasn't sure what he was defending himself against. The black door remained unchanged, but its presence was impossible to ignore. It felt like it was watching him, waiting for something. Asterisk, it was around 3 a.m. when Mark finally dozed off on the couch, the bat still clutched in his hands. He woke to the sound of a deep, resonant creak, the unmistakable sound of a door opening. His blood ran cold. Slowly, he turned his head toward the hallway. The black door was ajar. Asterisk, he didn't want to investigate. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to leave, to run and never come back. But something compelled him to move, as if an invisible force was pulling him closer. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, but they didn't seem to be coming from the door anymore. They were coming from inside his head. Asterisk, Mark stepped into the hallway, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. The door was wide open now, revealing nothing but pitch-black darkness beyond. He hesitated at the threshold, gripping the bat tightly. "Hello," he called out, his voice trembling. There was no answer, just silence. And then a single word echoed from the void. "Enter." Asterisk, against his better judgment, Mark stepped through the doorway. The air was freezing, and the darkness was absolute. He couldn't see his own hand in front of his face. As he moved forward, the ground beneath him felt strange. Not wood, not carpet, but something soft and damp. The whispers returned, louder than ever, swirling around him like a storm. He could feel them pressing against his skin, like hands clawing at him. Asterisk, asterisk, and then the darkness shifted. Shapes began to emerge, tall, shadowy figures with glowing eyes that seemed to watch his every move. Mark tried to back away, but the doorway was gone. He was trapped. The whispers turned to laughter, cruel and mocking, and the figures began to close in. One of them reached out, its hand impossibly long, its fingers like knives. It touched his shoulder, and Mark felt a searing pain, as if his flesh were burning. Asterisk, asterisk, in a panic, he swung the bat wildly, but it passed through the figure as if it wasn't there. The laughter grew louder, deafening, until Mark dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, everything stopped. The figures, the laughter, the pain, all of it vanished. And then he heard a voice, clear and cold, whisper in his ear, "You belong to us now." Asterisk, asterisk. Mark woke up on the floor of his hallway, bat in hand. The black door was gone, as if it had never been there. For a moment, he thought it might have been a nightmare, but the pain in his shoulder told him otherwise. When he looked in the mirror, he saw a mark burned into his skin, a symbol he didn't recognize, but one that filled him with dread. Asterisk, asterisk. He moved out of the house the next day, refusing to spend another night there. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. Wherever he went, he felt like he was being watched. Shadows moved in the corners of his vision, and at night, he dreamed of the black door, standing in the middle of an endless void, waiting for him to return. Asterisk, asterisk. Mark's story is one of many. Others have reported seeing similar doors in their homes, doors that don't belong, doors that lead to nowhere. The question is, if you saw one, would you open it? Asterisk, asterisk. Some doors are meant to stay closed, but curiosity has a way of pulling us toward the unknown, even when we know we shouldn't go. So the next time you see a door where there shouldn't be one, think twice before you open it, because once you step through, you might not come back. Asterisk. There's something about long drives at night, the empty highways, the soft hum of the engine, and the feeling that you're completely alone. But what if you weren't? Tonight's story takes us to a quiet stretch of road known as Route 46, a place with an eerie reputation. For some, it's just another highway. For others, it's the site of encounters they'd rather forget. This is the story of a man named David and the silent passenger he picked up one fateful night. Asterisk, asterisk. It was a cold January night in 2024 when David found himself driving down Route 46. He worked as a delivery driver for a local courier company, often taking late-night shifts to avoid the daytime traffic. This particular night was no different, and his only goal was to get home as quickly as possible. The road stretched out before him like a ribbon of darkness, the occasional street lamp casting long, lonely shadows. Asterisk, asterisk. David had always enjoyed the solitude of night drives. With no one else around, it gave him time to think, or not think at all. But something about the stretch of Route 46 always felt off. Locals called it the Road of Shadows, a name that stemmed from decades of strange sightings and unexplained disappearances. Of course, David didn't believe in any of that. He was a skeptic, a practical man. Ghost stories were for campfires, not highways. At least, that's what he thought. Asterisk, asterisk. It was just past midnight when David noticed the first sign that something wasn't right. His radio, which had been playing a local station, suddenly cut out. At first, it was just static, a minor annoyance. But then, the static started to form a pattern. It sounded like whispers, faint, distorted voices that he couldn't quite make out. David frowned, tapping the radio's buttons, but it was no use. The whispers grew louder, almost as if they were coming from inside the car. Asterisk, shaking it off. He focused on the road ahead. That's when he saw her. A figure standing at the edge of the highway, illuminated by his headlights. She was dressed in a pale blue dress, her long dark hair hanging loose around her face. David slowed down instinctively, his heart racing. She didn't move, didn't wave for help. She just stood there, staring at his car as he approached. Asterisk, David's first thought was that she must have been stranded, maybe from a broken down car. Against his better judgment, he pulled over. Rolling down the window slightly, he called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need a ride?" Asterisk, the woman didn't respond. She simply walked toward the passenger side door, opened it, and got in without a word. David was too startled to say anything at first. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Her presence was unnerving, but David reasoned that she must have been in shock. Maybe she'd been in an accident or something. "Where are you headed?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Still no answer. Asterisk. The drive continued in silence, with only the sound of the tires on the asphalt to break the tension. David couldn't stop glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. There was something wrong about her. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent under the dim light of the dashboard. And her eyes, when he dared to look at them, seemed blank, as if she were staring at something far away that he couldn't see. Asterisk, he tried to shake off his unease. Maybe she was just traumatized. But then, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Her feet. They weren't touching the floor of the car. In fact, they weren't there at all. Where her legs should have been, there was nothing but empty air. Asterisk. David's grip on the wheel tightened as panic set in. He wanted to pull over, to get out of the car, but something inside him told him not to. It felt as if the air in the car had grown heavier, pressing down on his chest. The whispers from the radio had returned, louder this time, and they seemed to be forming words. "She's with you. She's with you." Asterisk, unable to stand the silence any longer, David finally turned to face her. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling. For the first time, the woman moved. Slowly, she turned her head to look at him, her expression blank. And then she smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was twisted, unnatural, stretching too wide for her face. Her eyes, once blank, were now pitch black. Asterisk, take me home, she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally in the small cabin of the car. Before David could respond, the car's engine sputtered and died. The headlights flickered, plunging them into darkness. David's heart pounded as he fumbled to restart the car, but it was no use. The woman began to laugh, a low, guttural sound that sent chills down his spine. "You shouldn't have stopped," she said, her voice overlapping with the distorted whispers from the radio. Asterisk, in a blind panic. David threw open the car door and ran. He didn't look back, didn't stop until he reached a gas station miles down the road. When he explained what had happened, the attendant's face went pale. "You saw her," the man said quietly. "The woman from the bridge. She's been dead for years." Asterisk. David later learned that the woman he had picked up was a local legend. Decades ago, she had been killed in a hit-and-run accident on Route 46. Drivers claimed to see her wandering the highway, waiting for someone to pick her up. Those who did were never the same. Asterisk, Asterisk, David never drove Route 46 again. He quit his job shortly after the incident, unable to shake the feeling that he was still being watched. Sometimes, late at night, he swore he could hear the faint sound of laughter coming from his radio, even when it was turned off. Was it all in his head, or had he truly encountered something beyond explanation? One thing was certain. He would never forget the silent passenger he picked up that night. Asterisk, stories like these make you think twice about stopping for strangers. You never know who or what you might be letting into your car. So the next time you find yourself driving down an empty road late at night, remember this. Some passengers aren't looking for a ride. They're looking for you. Asterisk. Asterisk, have you ever heard something strange while tuning an old radio? Maybe it was just static, or maybe it wasn't. Radios have long been associated with paranormal phenomena, acting as a bridge between our world and something we can't quite explain. Tonight's story isn't just about a haunted radio. It's about the terrifying consequences of listening to what you weren't meant to hear. This is the story of voices in the static. Asterisk, a man named Alex moved into a small, rundown apartment in the city. He had just gone through a bitter divorce and needed a fresh start. The apartment wasn't much, peeling wallpaper, creaky floorboards, and a weird smell he couldn't quite place, but it was cheap, and that's all that mattered. Alex's new home came with one peculiar feature, an old, vintage radio that had been left behind by the previous tenant. It sat on a dusty shelf in the living room, its cracked knobs and faded wooden frame giving it a ghostly charm. Asterisk at first, Alex didn't pay much attention to the radio. He was too busy unpacking and trying to adjust to his new life. But one night, while he was lying on the couch, unable to sleep, he decided to turn it on. The radio emitted a low hum, followed by the familiar crackle of static. Alex twisted the dial, searching for a station, but only static greeted him. Then, just as he was about to give up, he heard it, a voice. Faint, distorted, and buried deep within the noise. Asterisk, help me. The voice whispered, barely audible above the static. Alex froze, his fingers hovering over the dial. He adjusted it slightly, trying to make the voice clearer, but it was gone. Shaking his head, he convinced himself that he had imagined it. Maybe it was a stray signal or interference from another device. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that it had been something else. Asterisk, over the next few nights, Alex found himself drawn to the radio. Each time he turned it on, the static seemed to grow louder, more alive. And each time, the voice returned, becoming clearer with every session. Help me, it repeated over and over. Sometimes, it sounded like a woman's voice. Other times, it was deeper, more menacing. Alex couldn't explain why, but he felt compelled to keep listening. Asterisk, one night, after hours of listening to the static, Alex decided to do some research. He learned that the apartment's previous tenant, a man named Robert, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Neighbors reported hearing strange noises, voices, whispers, and even screams coming from his unit in the weeks before he vanished. The police had found no evidence of foul play, and the case remained unsolved. Asterisk, Alex's curiosity soon turned into obsession. He spent hours tweaking the radio, trying to communicate with the voices. One evening, as he sat in the dimly lit room with the radio crackling softly, the voice changed. It was no longer asking for help. Instead, it was laughing, a low, guttural sound that made Alex's skin crawl. "You shouldn't have listened," it said, the words echoing unnaturally through the static. Asterisk, from that night on, things started to spiral out of control. The radio would turn on by itself, even when Alex unplugged it. The static seemed to follow him, bleeding into his phone calls, his TV, even his dreams. In one particularly horrifying incident, Alex woke up in the middle of the night to find the radio sitting on the floor next to his bed, its volume dial spinning wildly on its own. Asterisk, the voices grew louder, more aggressive. They began to call Alex by name, taunting him with secrets from his past. Things no one else could possibly know. "You left her," they hissed. "You'll end up just like Robert." Alex tried to get rid of the radio, but no matter where he threw it, into the dumpster, the river, even a bonfire, it always found its way back to the apartment, perfectly intact. Asterisk, desperate for answers, Alex reached out to a local paranormal investigator named Claire. When she arrived at the apartment, Claire immediately sensed something was wrong. "This isn't just a haunted object," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a gateway." According to Claire, the radio was acting as a conduit for something dark and malevolent, a force that fed on fear and despair. Asterisk, Claire performed a cleansing ritual, but as she chanted, the radio began to emit a deafening screech. The room shook violently, and the voices screamed in unison, "You can't stop us." The lights flickered, and for a brief moment, Alex saw them. Shadowy figures writhing in the static, their twisted faces pressed against the walls. Asterisk, the ritual seemed to work, and the radio fell silent. But Claire warned Alex that the connection wasn't entirely severed. "They'll try to find a way back," she said. "You need to leave this place." Asterisk, Alex followed Claire's advice and moved out of the apartment, leaving the radio behind. For a while, things seemed to return to normal. But one night, as he was driving home from work, his car radio crackled to life. Static filled the speakers, and then the voice returned. "We found you," it said, followed by the sound of laughter. Asterisk, Alex slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding. He stared at the radio, terrified, as the static grew louder and louder. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Alex sat in stunned silence, his mind racing. He thought he had escaped, but deep down he knew the truth. You can't outrun the voices and the static. Asterisk, some things are better left unheard. Radios, with their connection to unseen frequencies, may bring more than just music into our lives. So, the next time you hear a faint whisper in the static, ask yourself, is it just interference or something far worse? Asterisk,